Steph.
With a quiet leader.
The Curry quick release. Splash!
And a not-so-quiet one.
Rejected by Draymond. Knocked away. What a block!
And above all, a team that brings the entire Bay Area together.
Curry, one step in front of the logo. A right-hand slam on a little elevation. Sensation.
This is Warriors Live on 95.7. The Game.
And tonight, the Golden State Warriors do battle with the Minnesota Timberwolves as the Warriors get back to sea level, a 500 team at 20 up and 20 down. Hi again, everybody, and welcome to Warriors Live. This is Dan Devone. Warriors Live, like always, presented by Xfinity. Stream sports from the best seat in the house with Xfinity. Bring on the good stuff. Well, the Warriors at 20 and 20 take on the worst team in the NBA, that being the Washington Wizards. Of course, we got you covered for the next half hour before we hand things off to Tim Roy, who, like always, will have the call for tonight's contest. The Warriors coming off that win against the Minnesota Timberwolves in a game in which they were up by some 24 points, and you just had the feeling, and this is not a shot at the Warriors, and maybe it is indirectly, but you just knew that that run was coming at some point by Ant-Man and company, but able to stave off the Minnesota Timberwolves, and thanks in large part to who else? Steph Curry, who hit a late three from the corner to seal the win. The Warriors, 116-115 winners. That was on Wednesday, their last game out. So the Warriors, who had lost 4 of their last 5, coming off a victory and a positive note in which Andrew Wiggins played well. Wiggins finished with 24 points in some 35 minutes. Guy Santos continues to play well. Now, Santos finished with only 5 points, but again, he could be and figure prominently in tonight's contest against the Wizards, as the Warriors, as we'll get into the injury report, are in desperate need of bodies and for the so-called backups, not only to step into starting roles, but also to play significant minutes and to be heavily relied upon. But Andrew Wiggins, I think, somewhat of an X factor in tonight's contest. You're always looking for that one person who's going to alleviate the scoring duties from one Steph Curry. As I talked about, Wiggins in 35 minutes finished with the 24 points. I think Wiggins has got to be big once again as the Warriors continue to play without Jonathan Kuminga. Kuminga, who injuries are always bad and always untimely, but when you think about Jonathan Kuminga, just when it looked as though, yet again, he was turning the corner, and just when it looked as though Steve Kerr, the light had gone on, where he was relying on Kuminga, there was no more yo-yoing back and forth or messing with his minutes, as they like to say. He was a guy that was getting 25 to 30 minutes a contest, and the Warriors, as a result, were responding. But Jonathan Kuminga then turns the ankle, and the Warriors have struggled ever since. The Warriors, as I talked about, loses 4 of their last 5, but able to end the losing streak with that victory over the Minnesota Timberwolves, 116-115. So the Warriors, it's a tale of two cities. I talked about this earlier today on Warriors This Week, that you can invest in that 12-3 start where Golden State came out of nowhere, and one of the surprises early on in the season that they were a good basketball team with high energy. It started on the defense. It started with Steve Kerr and his innovative ways. Really, you can trace this back to the preseason where the Warriors went undefeated and then carried that over into the regular season where Golden State just handled everybody. And, of course, it was that one road trip where they went on the road for 5 games, taking on some of the best the NBA had to offer. Now, keep in mind, some of the teams they faced were not at full strength, but still, a win over OKC on the road, a win over the Boston Celtics, the defending champs, on the road, and going 4-1 in that trip made believers out of a lot of us. But was that the aberration? And I think as time elapsed and as we look back on it, I think that clearly that was the outlier. And the team that has going into Wednesday night's contest was 7-17 in the last 24 games, and now after the win against the T-Wolves, now 8-17 in their last 25. I think that's more indicative of who the Warriors are as they once again do battle tonight against the Washington Wizards. It's a team that has just simply struggled over the last 2 months. And we knew about this going in after the 12-3 start. The one thing that we continued to talk about was this something that they could sustain throughout the course of the season. And I think a lot of us have received the answer that this is a team that is a sub-500 squad. Now, the big question looms, what do they do with the trade deadline? Now just a couple of days away, a couple of weeks away. Do the Golden State Warriors, do they make that move? Do they look to improve the basketball team? We heard comments in the week that was, and what a week when Steph Curry not only is vocal about things that don't necessarily concern a win or a loss or a particular game, but when he's talking about an overview and projections of the team going forward, you might want to listen because he doesn't do it very frequently. And Steph, at one point, whether it was interpreted as him saying that it's not going to happen this year, some people went as far as to say that he was waving the white flag, that he was giving up on this season. And I think Steph felt as though he had to clarify his remarks the following day by demonstrating that he, and again, just something that I don't think any of us really needed to hear, but just to make sure that it was clear with everyone that Steph is about as competitive as anybody. And as long as he's upright and playing for the Warriors, he's looking to win. So he's certainly looking to win this season. So when you look back at the comments from Steph Curry over this past week, and we talked about this again earlier this morning, and my takeaway is when you talk about, well, we're not a player away, we can't mortgage the future, and this is on the heels of what it is that Steve Kerr had to say. We also heard from Draymond Green, who really sort of kicked this thing off in his interview with Yahoo Sports. I think it's clear that the Warriors aren't necessarily sure what it is that they're doing. And I think that for the first time in a long time, Steph Curry and the Golden State Warriors are a team that is void of an identity. That is this a team that is looking to, as we often say, match windows, get a player, make a run at it this year, while Steph is still Steph, soon to be 37 in about 2 months, Steph Curry. We always thought that was the doctrine, right? We always thought that was the mantra for the Golden State Warriors, is get some players so Steph can win. And win when? Well, win now. Win this year. And then Steph comes out and says what it is that he said in these practical terms, that essentially it's not going to happen this year and you don't want to mortgage the future. And again, a lot of people that interpreted that as Steph Curry saying, well, it's not happening. And he's not looking to win in 2025. And of course, as I mentioned, he came out the following night, and following the T-Wolves game, he had plenty of things to say, not necessarily concerning the 116-115 victory. Let's hear from Steph the other night.
Deals that we need to make can kind of just shut up a little bit and let us figure this thing out. Like we know we can be competitive. We showed that toughness tonight. Obviously, every team is trying to find ways to get better, and for us, we've been great for a very long time. This is just a unique year where we have to be able to stay relevant and give ourselves a chance and just have some life in a playoff series. And we have a whole lot of confidence that we can beat anybody. So that's it.
My, how times have changed. Just give ourselves a chance. Give ourselves an opportunity, some quote-unquote life in the postseason. That, according to Steph Curry. And I think, again, even as he clarified and cleaned up some of the things he had said the night prior, the writing is pretty much on the wall that this is a Golden State Warrior team that it's not going to happen this year. And I think that they realize as much. And by the way, as far as Steph dropping the stupid word, which is in this day and age is pretty harmless when you think about some of the other verbal darts that are thrown out on a daily basis by professional athletes. But for Steph Curry, that's about as aggressive as he's going to get, especially when it comes to the consumers and or you, the fan. But it's getting dire straits with the Golden State Warriors. And I think that the entire outlook, as Steph said, and we don't want to break down just one quote and one brief soundbite from Steph Curry, but basically what this 16-year veteran is saying is that if you get into the postseason, you give yourself a shot, it's going to be considered a successful season. And that's how far the bar has been lowered for the Golden State Warriors. That I know people want to stay away from words like rebuild, whether you want to clean it up and sugar things by saying this is a transition, so be it. But this is a team that is clearly headed in another direction. And I think that one thing that's becoming very clear to a lot of fans is that it's a team that is imbalanced, that you have this veteran core and your two best players, being Steph and Draymond, are 35 and 36 years of age, respectively. And then you have these younger basketball players that are too young to be relied upon And there is no middle ground. There is no sweet spot, meaning there are no players that are in the prime of their careers that the Warriors are heavily relying on. So do you blow this thing up? Do you look to make moves over the offseason? Do you look to get into the lottery? Never want to tank, but I don't think that for a Warrior team right now, getting draft picks and getting single-digit draft selections beginning this year is not the worst thing for a team that has to get younger and has to get relevant. There is no, and I wish there was, and we could sit here and say, well, you need to trade for this guy or go get X, Y, and Z and do this, that, and the other. There is no off-ramp on this. And as we say time and time again, that when it comes to dynasty, these things usually explode, and it usually gets worse before it gets better. I'm of the belief that the sooner you get your arms around a rebuild, the sooner you come to the realization that this is a team that's beginning anew, the quicker you begin to rebuild, and the quicker you get back to relevancy. The worst thing you want to do is be where the Golden State Warriors are, where you're teetering on a team that has no identity, that has 1 foot in and potentially talking about making a run this year, and then 1 foot that's thinking about, next year. And I think that was made very evident this past week by the comments by Steph Curry. On one night, he's talking about how this is a team that's better off just looking to evaluate over the offseason and make wise decisions and not do anything rash. And then talking about, well, I'm as competitive as anybody, so, yeah, I want to win this year, and we get into the playoffs, and you never know what's going to happen. That's a team that again, is lacking sort of a path forward. This league is oftentimes just broken up between the haves and the have-nots, and you have the OKCs, you have Houston, you have teams that are very good in this league, and OKC, it's got to be the odds-on favorite to at least get to the NBA Finals this year. Boston, certainly Cleveland. And then whether it's Houston or Dallas or Memphis, that maybe they feel as though they're a player or two away from eclipsing and jumping the OKCs of the world and winning a title of their own. I mean, that's a narrative that you can understand. There's an identity with those teams. The identity being is that they're in the conversation to not only win the West, but potentially win an NBA title this year. And then you have the identity of the bottom half, the lower rung of the ladder, if you will, in both the Eastern and the Western Conference. The teams like Utah, the teams like Portland, teams like the opponent for the Warriors tonight, Washington and Charlotte, where it's clear that this is a team that's looking to cut salary. It's looking to go young. It's looking to invest in the future. It's looking to get draft picks and build from there. Detroit has taken strides. When you look at OKC, who have elevated as obviously the team to beat, their turnaround was relatively quick. Now, I don't know if that's a fair example because of the draft. Well, it wasn't draft capital, but the trade assets they had of Russell Westbrook and being able to trade Paul George and moving off on those players sooner rather than later and getting SGA back and getting 5 first-round draft picks and getting draft picks for Russell Westbrook. It's about – this is the time where a Mike Dunleavy has really got to earn his living. You want to walk around in $5,000 suits? Well, this is how you get to be that guy, is that you got to be able to be 2 steps ahead. And you have to be able to have the foresight to move off of Klay Thompson before he became an unrestricted free agent. In my estimation, to move off of Draymond Green, well, you still had some trade value. As of right now, you're an old team with very little market value in terms of trade assets. And as far as the future is concerned, as we hear this, don't mortgage the future, well, I would, throw this out to Dub Nation. Is the future that proven? Jonathan Kuminga certainly is somebody that I can invest in. And Jonathan Kuminga, to me, is somebody that personifies a future word, although, there's still some rough patches with his game. But is Trace Jackson-Davis the future? He could be. Is Podziemski the future? Maybe. Is Moses Moody the future? Yeah, I don't know. On any of those guys. Certainly, that could flip one way or the other. But it's not like Houston. It's not like Memphis. It's not like OKC, when you talk about the future, we clearly know who those players are. We know what stars in the making look like. And I don't know that that's necessarily the case with the Golden State Warriors. So as much as we talk about, well, hands off the kids, hands off the future, we don't want to give up on some of the youngsters and or draft picks. Again, I don't know that, some of the stars of tomorrow are necessarily proven when it comes to the Golden State Warriors. And it's a tough spot to be in. But, hey, listen, stranger things have happened. As I try and, sell you on this thing, I don't want to be that guy because the Warriors are coming off a win and taking on a Wizard team they should be able to handle. And as I mentioned, it always feels better. The T-Wolves are a team that was, close to going to the NBA Finals a year ago. They were in the Western Conference Finals, eventually losing to Dallas, and the Warriors have been able to handle them this year. So maybe they recapture that lightning in a bottle that they had early on in the season, that defensive pressure and using, 10 to 11, 12, 13 guys. Maybe that comes back. Jonathan Kuminga will come back. Draymond Green eventually will come back to this basketball team, and maybe they can return to their winning ways. And it's clearly an opportunity with Washington coming up tonight. All right, the injury report. Tonight's injury report is brought to you by Boxer & Gerson, Northern California's premier workers' compensation law firm, helping injured workers get their lives back for over 40 years. For more info, visit boxerlaw.com. Kyle Anderson, slow-mo, is not going to be available for tonight's game. Draymond Green, questionable. He's listed as out, but I think that's more of a game-time decision. When we hand things off to Tim Roy, I think he'll have a much more clear idea as to whether or not Draymond will be in the starting lineup tonight. Jonathan Kuminga eventually will not. Kuminga, of course, who has got that bad ankle, still in a walking boot, and it's going to be a while before JK. As I mentioned, it's really unfortunate because Kuminga was just beginning to turn the corner and be that dominant force that everybody's been awaiting on. Unfortunately, he goes down with the injury, and once again, not available tonight. Brandon Podziemski out with that abdomen injury as well, so he will not be available for Golden State as well. Meanwhile, when you talk about the Washington Wizards, they are going to be without some of their key players. Let's bring them up if I can get down to the Washington Wizards. Washington Wizards going to be without Malcolm Brogdon, not available for tonight's contest. I'm doing this all to memory because for some reason, Grant, I cannot bring up the wall. Here we go. Washington Wizards without Marvin Bagley. He's not going to be available tonight. Talked about Malcolm Brogdon out, and Sadiq Bey also not available for tonight's contest. So, yeah, Washington is pretty much at full strength. You like to have Malcolm Brogdon, the veteran, available, but I think that when you talk about the Warriors' injuries, especially if Draymond's not available to go and not having the services of what Jonathan Kuminga, it's more prominent as far as the Warriors and the available bodies for them as opposed to that of the Washington Wizards. So when you talk about Washington, you know what that means. It's the return of one Jordan Poole. All eyes on Jordan Poole. And I'm going to leave it alone because I've been outspoken about Jordan Poole, who has been, he's been very good. And he has shown maturity. Leads the team in scoring at over 21 points a game. He's at 21.4. Leads the team in assists at 4.8. He's reduced his turnovers, which was clearly a concern, especially when he was the first guy off the bench in that important role in relieving Steph Curry a couple of years back. And it's the reason why they went in the direction of getting Chris Paul, because they wanted some maturity and security at that level. But Poole is showing that he's grown up. And as I talked about, not only the 21 points, but he's shooting it at better than 40% from three, right around 44% from the floor. So, Jordan Poole is a leader for what is the worst team in the NBA. And a lot of people want to point at the fact that he's a guy that the Warriors should have never relinquished. I would always push back that not only did it obviously stem from the incident with Draymond Green, but I think that he fell out of, he was in disfavor of that of Steve Kerr, and a guy that just was not, was toxic at times. And not only with Draymond Green, and I'm not putting this on Jordan Poole. Again, I'd much rather underline the kid's ability to grow and learn from his mistakes, and he has really blossomed this year, as I talked about, scoring over 21 a game. Kyle Kuzma, the longtime veteran, is the second leading scorer on this team. coming in at over 14 points a contest. Valanciunas is the leading rebounder on this team at over 8 a game. Malcolm Brogdon is going to be missed, as I talked about. He is the third leading scorer at 13 points a contest. Somebody you want to keep an eye on, a fine, young-looking Frenchman, Bilal Koulibaly. Help me out, Graham. Koulibaly. That's it. Koulibaly.
Yeah, there you go.
He's a good-looking player, and he fits today's game. He's a bit of a swing man. He's long, he's lean, and he's young though. And he's one of those guys that sort of today he's still working on sort of his outside shooting, but is one of those guys that just fits in today's game. Right? He's a two-way player and could just run the floor, got a high motor, and has shown a lot of growth this year. And then it's the young man, Alexander Sarr, who was a high draft pick, a lottery pick this year. He's coming off, or I believe he was the Eastern Conference Rookie of the Month, although it is a draft class, not to take shots, that I think when you look back in retrospect, it's somewhat forgettable. But Sarr has been good. Sarr's in double digits at 11 points a game, but he's no Cooper Flagg. He's not a Chet Holmgren, and he's not a Victor Wembanyama, clearly, but he looks serviceable. But for somebody who was taken as high in that draft, you would maybe expect more. But I think, again, you have to take into consideration that was a very, very weak draft class. But Alexander Sarr is going to get some playing time as he's a guy that is averaging just about between 27 and 28 minutes a contest to go along with, as I talked about, Jonas Valanciunas, the longtime veteran who has been rumored to potentially be a trade piece for that of the Golden State Warriors. Corey Kispert, the veteran out of Gonzaga, is also somebody that they will rely on. But it's a Washington Wizard team that is clearly an inferior team to that of the Warriors, who, again, the Wizards have won just 6 times this year, but Golden State's just looking to stack victories, and a clear opportunity tonight when they take on the Washington Wizards, the worst that the NBA has to offer. Again, there is going to be asterisks next to this one because the Warriors, anytime they take on Jordan Poole with all the histrionics and everything that went down, it's a game that Jordan Poole has an asterisk next to and always wants to play well when he comes back home. Out of town, game of the night presented by San Francisco International Airport. Wherever the team goes, you can get there from SFO. How about the Rockets and the Trailblazers? Only reason I went there, I'm going upset with the Portland Trailblazers. Also, Take It to the Bank prediction. It's time for Take It to the Bank prediction, brought to you by Fremont Bank. Full service banking, no compromises. I talked about Jordan Poole returning home, and one of his good friends on the team, somebody that he's still very friendly with, and that is Andrew Wiggins. And for that very reason, I'm going to go Andrew Wiggins as being our, that's right, Take It to the Bank prediction, as Andrew Wiggins, look for him to have another big night. Not only that, I'm being a bit tongue-in-cheek with his relationship with Jordan Poole. They do have a friendship, but that's not going to be the motivating factor. I think it's the fact that they need him, and he realizes as much. And Andrew Wiggins, look for him to have a double-double coming off the big 24-point performance the other night in leading the Golden State Warriors. And, of course, without one Jonathan Kuminga, it's Andrew Wiggins that is clearly going to need to step up. So it's an opportunity with the Warriors. They're going to get some home cooking here. The worm is turned in terms of some of the competition. So Golden State has a golden opportunity tonight to pick up another win. And listen, back-to-back victories can build some momentum going forward. As I mentioned, you're not taking on necessarily the best that the NBA has to offer. And if the Warriors can somehow just keep things at a point where there's renewed energy and you get back Jonathan Kuminga, then maybe they can make a run. Well, we'll find out what happens. Of course, I'll see you after the game. For right now, let's hand things off to Tim Roy and get you ready for the T-Wolves and the Golden State Warriors.
It's game time, Bay Area basketball fans. Whether you're flying out to catch an away game or taking that much-needed vacation, always start at San Francisco International Airport, the Bay Area's home court for travel. With convenient nonstop flights to more than 130 U.S. and international destinations, advanced booking for parking, unique shops, and tons of delicious meal options, SFO makes sure your trip kicks off like a home game